Okay, now we launch a little bit of a conversation. This is a packed book. If you've read it already, you know that. When you do read it, you really see that. There's a lot going on in this book. And he just flew over, skimmed barely, touching the top electrons as he went over some of the things that he talked about in the book. In my other life, I'm a French professor. I study literature. And so when I see the world, I think of narratives. Everyone tells stories to everyone all the time. That's what we do as human beings. So when I looked at this book, I thought, there are a bunch of stories going on here. And I thought that maybe there were 3 stories going on. And I'm going to ask Neil to comment on that, because I see 3 narratives running through this book, intertwined, interconnected, but certain 3 narratives. First one is a personal narrative, a journey, a story of somebody who grows up in South Africa, in a world very different from our world, goes through all sorts of trauma because of the political and social situation in the country, has to leave it, travels, ends up growing up in another country, and develops a love and a passion for a subject, something that's going to carry him all the way from South Africa to here in Waterloo and working at the Perimeter Institute. That's one story, a human story. There's another story, and in that second story, there's a different hero, and that hero is physics. All the way from Archimedes to Alexander until the modern day, until Einstein and others, and Turok, we have a whole story of actors, but the real hero is physics. And we see from time immemorial how the human mind and the application of rationality has been able to overcome problems. And bit by bit, we understand ever more of this great complex and yet nonetheless exceedingly simple in many ways universe. And then there's another story, and that's the forward-looking story, and that's the story of the quantum future. That we seem to be on the verge of another world, of something that's really big that's going to happen, which we can't even imagine. So I put that to you. When you were writing this book, did you actually have those 3 stories in mind, or how did that sort of come about?
Yeah, I guess these are things I was aware of at some level, but like most physicists, I never took a course in history or literature or any other subject. One of the dreadful things about modern education system is that it segregates these subjects, and then at university segregates the departments, and so nobody can see the bigger picture. It's weird. It's pretty important to see the bigger picture to know where you're going. If you want to understand where you're going, you have to step back. And so I underwent, I think in about 3 months, a sort of crash course in liberal arts, self-taught by reading, hundreds of books and panicking about what to say. And I guess the only thing the only angle I had is that maybe I can use this thread of math and physics through history as a sort of single thread through human history and human progress, and maybe that will make sense. And so that was the thread I pulled on, and I found to my amazement that it made perfect sense. There are many other threads in history, but this one is absolutely coherent. There's a discovery of some mathematical concept, which is very deep, but doesn't seem to have any practical application at all. And then 100 or 200 years later, this turns out to be the key to figuring out how something works. I'll give you an example. There was the mathematician Leonard Euler. Now, when you do physics, you learn about Euler's equation, and Euler's angles, and Euler's this and Euler's that, but you never pay any attention to history. Who cares about history? But this guy Euler discovered something called exponentials. And, we do sometimes talk about exponential growth, this very dramatic growth. Well, the number e is named for Euler. I didn't even know that before I wrote the book. Okay, physicists aren't taught that. What we're also not taught is that Euler discovered an absolutely magical formula, which is right in the middle of quantum mechanics. So if you take the number e, which is described exponential growth, and you take the number I, which is the square root of -1, the imaginary number, and you take the number pi, which is the ratio of the circumference to the diameter of a circle, and you form e to the power I pi, you get -1. It's completely weird. How do these things have anything to do with each other? And that same formula is right in the middle of quantum mechanics. And so, things which were discovered through abstract exploration by people with a very acute sense for what was beautiful, fundamental, important, those things turn out to be profound. And those things are actually driving us into the future. So I think, that narrative about how we create the future by understanding the universe is, for me, very powerful. And certainly gives a lot of meaning to what we're trying to do at Perimeter. What we're trying to do is to make the next step in that abstract, as simple as possible description of nature, with the expectation that when we do, this is going to change everything. So, now, I'm not sure I'm really answering your question about the other narratives, but perhaps I could say the following. I was born to politically active parents, okay, who basically sacrificed their lives for what they believed in. They were quite happy to go to jail. In fact, they considered it an honor to go to jail because they were going to jail for a cause they believed in. And when we left South Africa in 1966, there seemed to be no chance of South Africa ever changing. They were a very powerful country. They had nuclear weapons. They spent nearly 10% of the budget on the police force. Very powerful police force. And there seemed absolutely no chance it would ever change. But my parents believed it would because they believed in the power of ideas. They believed they had the right idea. Society needs to be equitable, and in time, that idea would win. And as a child, I didn't, it's hard to believe that. Very hard to believe. I thought my parents were pretty nutty. They seemed to be constantly on the run. Nobody else lived like that. We lived out of suitcases, and my dad ended up selling Encyclopedia Britannica on the streets in England when we got there, from door to door. But he believed in what he was doing. So what I saw through that narrative is the incredible power of ideas and consistency. If you find the right idea, you stick to it, and you don't give in to the sea of common prejudice which surrounds us. In the end, it will win. The right ideas will win. And so I saw that in my personal life, and that gave me a lot of courage in basically trying to tackle ridiculous questions in physics, like what happened at the Big Bang. That's a very profound question. Practical person would say, who cares? This is not relevant to our lives. But slightly more impractical and longer-sighted person will say, that's how we understand the universe, by thinking about those questions. And when we solve them, they change, the solutions change everything. And I would claim that when we understand the Big Bang, and how it is that everything around us came into existence 14 billion years ago, and when we understand the energy that's in space all around us, this will open the door to the future. We don't know quite how, but I'm absolutely confident that it will.